Hey guys, welcome back to the Sunday night show. We're gonna go right into it. Let's go into some trades that might make you some money this week. And before we go into earnings or those trades, what I wanna talk about is one of the themes of this week, which is a lack of bouncers in the stock market. So what do I mean by that? Usually in the stock market, stocks go up and then they drop and then they bounce and then they drop and then they bounce. But what I've been noticing with a lot of growth names is a complete lack of bounceability. We've seen that with a number of stocks. You guys have seen my frustration with Palantir. Once again, that's a long-term buy for me. I mentioned that way too early in the video this time. But Palantir had another huge breakdown last week where it hit around $11 a share as of close on Friday. But there doesn't seem to be any end in sight. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that a lot of these stocks are essentially overvalued. They're all growth. They have yet to really make money. The market right now wants a little bit more security, and it seems like the leading stocks in the S&P are what is keeping the S&P index above 4,300. You know, so you have your Apples, your Amazons, and things like that. Essentially, a lot of these growth names have crashed. So I mentioned Palantir, but let's go over, for example, many of the other earnings from last week. Let's look at Airbnb. Airbnb was one of the few ones that held okay, around 5%. But you look at Shopify, it went from like 800 to like 600 overnight. You look at Nvidia's chart from last week, completely blasted. Okay, Nvidia is holding, all right? I'm not gonna say it was decimated, but it's been bleeding out from about around 300, like 320. And it does not seem to be catching any form of bounce here. Cisco did okay, but QuantumScape, bled from like $110 down to like $16. It was a very volatile, swingy kind of move, but for the most part, it's been down. Palantir, Roku stock is another one. It was around 480, my mind was blown. I didn't even want to short the stock there, just because the fact that it kept moving in that direction, I was just nervous about that stock. But from that time, from November till now, there's been just a complete bleed out in Roku. Palantir has bled out. DraftKings announced earnings last Friday, and it failed to bounce after a pretty large bleed out. So I want you guys to keep that in mind, because there's a lot of stocks that I'm going to be talking about this earnings season. Don't go in with that mentality that, hey, I'm going to be buying the dip. Sometimes buying the dip is actually very scary, because stocks can continue to sell off for exaggerated periods of time, as we've seen with Roku, as we've seen with Nvidia, Shopify. Shopify corrected from 1,600 to 600 now. Roku is a quarter of its value. Palantir has bled 70% since basically the start of the year. What's very interesting about this is, despite these stocks being on a lot of traders' radars, they've been crashing. They've essentially all crashed. And more stocks that I'm gonna be discussing today have already crashed for the earnings. So don't place bets on earnings. Oh, these stocks have crashed, they can only go higher from here. That might not happen, you guys. So just keep that in mind. I had 100 shares of Roku going into earnings thinking it's just a small trade for me. I'm not probably gonna lose maybe $500 to $1,000 at max. I think I'm down like $4 grand. Before we go into earnings, I wanna talk about one thing. Take a look at Facebook stock. Facebook has yet to bounce from its huge sell-off. So even buying a stock like Roku, where you've seen a massive sell-off that's happened last year, don't expect the action to be immediately like bought back up as an overreaction. I think the market is trying to figure out what it wants to do with the Fed, and it needs some time to digest. Netflix, after getting a pretty good bounce after the earnings dump, so earnings dumped down to like 340, bounced to like 420, it's now back around $391 a share. I think there's still a lot of action in Netflix, so it's something I would still watch, but don't expect these bounces to occur right away. My general rule of thumb is wait for a clear-cut turn around before you get in on any of these names, or like already it's starting to bounce before you put a lot of capital or put a very small amount as a starter position. Anyway, let's go right into earnings. So Tuesday, we have Palo Alto Networks, PANW. This is one of the few stocks that has not really corrected hard yet. It looks like it's in the process of correcting, or it might start correcting soon. Came off a high around 556, but the chart is not really clear. It looks like it may want to go down, but an earnings can easily send that, a positive earnings can easily send that back higher. So Palo Alto Networks, pay attention to that one. Let's look at Exact Sciences, ticker symbol EXAS. Kind of has been bleeding out since it hit $100 a share back in July, 128 back in July, and I'm sorry, 100 back around November and 128 around July. But it's at $74 right now, and we might not get a bounce in earnings, but it's a very volatile name and one I pay attention to during earnings. So watch ticker symbol EXAS, Exact Sciences. Once again, a potential no bouncer here. I'm still watching it because it's a very volatile name. Take a look at this stock. Cathie Wood, I don't know if you're still holding on to this, or maybe you should just quit the game of investing altogether. Teladoc was one of Cathie Wood's favorite investments at one point. It went from $293 a share, February 2021, and it has done nothing but bleed out since then. Obviously some spikes, some bounces, but done nothing but bleed out. It's at $65 a share right now. Essentially, it's at its pre-COVID, it's lower than its pre-COVID spike, or around that same range, ballpark. So Teladoc is one that you should be watching for this earnings. Hopefully we get a bounce. I don't have any exposure, but I want something to trade. And although you can short these, I feel like if these stocks do bounce, they are going to bounce violently. And it's usually easier to take the long trades than it is to take short trades, my opinion. Teladoc, TDOC, Cathie Wood. I don't know what you're doing between Teladoc and Roku. How much is ARK down? So the ARK Innovation ETF, ARKK, if you guys get a chance to pull that up, $140 a share down to 64, just a violent freaking bleed out. And it just might be a sign of the market where growth is just not getting its proper bump right now. Sucks to be invested in ARK right now. Anyway, let us mosey along here. On Wednesday, we have Lowe's. This is probably the only one that is on the lower beta side. I don't think it's gonna move that much. We have Arna Pharmaceuticals, ticker symbol ARNA. This didn't really have a bleed out yet. In fact, it's had quite a move since December. And let's see what happens here. Is it gonna freeze up? Is it gonna continue to run? Quite a move. Let's watch the trade. Not the most liquid trade, but sometimes a very good earnings play. Lemonade, insurance play right here. It was a very volatile name last year. But yeah, once again, like all of these other names, Lemonade, it has been bleeding out and there's no clear sign that it's gonna bounce from here. It's fallen from $163 to $26 a share, and it's a very volatile name and one to play during earnings. And my God, oh my God, wow. I might just buy a little bit of that for the long term. Skills, next one on our list. There are people calling for Skills to go to zero. It is a very speculative stock. Ticker symbol SKLZ. I think I bought a large chunk of this stock around $12 a share. And by large chunk, I mean not like $100, $200, $300,000 worth. That's only my Palantir, which is over $1 million worth, and it's probably halved in value. But Skills, I bought $40,000 worth of Skills around $12 a share, and it's bled out. This was supposed to be a medium-term trade for me, and I'm going to be holding the bag on this for a very long time. There are people calling that this is going to go to zero. I don't know what else to say about that name. Pretty much why I stopped buying dips, Skills and Palantir, and some other names. Anyway, moving along, let's go into some decent names. Those are all of Wednesday's earnings. Wednesday, let's skip Lowe's actually. Focus on Arna and Lemonade and Skills. And then on Tuesday, we had Palo Alto Networks, Exact Sciences, and Teladoc. Thursday's kind of the big day full of names, you guys. On Thursday, we have Autodesk. Autodesk is usually a pretty good earnings play. It's not necessarily the easiest name to trade or watch the tape on. You can see random spikes, but it's dropped a lot, 322 since November. It's another name that makes me feel like the internals of the market are being really heavily disguised by the actual valuation of the overall S&P, because Autodesk was around $329 a share in November, but it's around 216, basically coming in 33%, losing a large chunk of value. Can drop a lot more from here. So let's see. Moderna. Honestly, Moderna's on Thursday, and what's very interesting about this stock is its chart looks a lot like Roku's chart, in my opinion, where Roku had this massive spike up that occurred in 3 months. Essentially what happened to Moderna between July and September of 2021, it hit $400 a share and then just a bleed out. Let's go through Square, kind of in the same boat. They changed I refuse to fucking call them Block. I think the stock crashed after they changed the name to Block. It had crashed in November too, 253 down to $97 a share. My God. Etsy's coming out. I don't really want to talk anymore about Etsy, you guys. Watch Etsy as well. Ticker symbol ETSY. We have Zscaler out, which is another tech name that has a lot of movement. Once again, it spiked in November and basically dropped from there. And we have Beyond Meat, which has been bleeding out all year, because although it is definitely Beyond Meat, it is not beyond proper valuation with an insane price to earnings ratio that no one can really quantify. It has a Peloton-like shape to its chart of just like a trajectory downward since July. Fuck you, Beyond Meat, for your high-fat, low-quality fake meat, and for you not helping me make money, okay? Friday, we have Berkshire Hathaway, ticker symbol BRK.A. Probably not the best trade, but it's actually a good bellwether just to see what is happening with earnings, to see his exposure to the market. And the only tradable name that I'm watching on Friday is LI. Other than that, you can watch everything else throughout the week. We haven't seen a strong bounce in some of these names since November, and last week's earnings, none of them bounced on earnings. In fact, they dropped even harder on earnings, and we're going to see if that's going to happen this week as well. I'm not just talking about bleed out names, by the way. These are all names that typically have a lot of movement on earnings, but they bled out a lot. And I think at some point we will see a bounce in some of these names. If you look at them, they've all crashed. They're all down. A lot of these are down more than 50%, you know, so there will come a time where these things will spike, so I would keep these on your permanent watch list, not just like for this week, but like kind of see what's happening. Is the tape moving in a positive direction? Especially for like decent names like Roku, like Palantir, who have really solid businesses. Even Nvidia, although it hasn't dropped much, or even DraftKings, because they do have good businesses at heart. It's just the market is not favoring growth right now. Anyway, that's it. That's all I have for you guys. Frugal Tiger lost some money this week. It wasn't the best trading week. ARKK, take a look at that chart and then pat yourself on the back that you're not a professional money manager like Kathy Wood. Hopefully her stocks get a bounce, because I have some of them, like Skills, like she sold out of Palantir, that fucking bitch. I just want the money.